Hi, everybody. This is the pre-recorded January Mama's Lunch Bunch. Apologies again that we weren't able to hold a live call this month. If you have any questions from this video, please don't hesitate to send me an email. Happy to answer any questions or dive a little deeper. We're going to do kind of a high-level overview of how to influence decision makers through media. And I am going to start the slideshow now. So again, this is getting lawmakers' attention through the media, how activists can use press and social media strategically. Most elected officials really won't act unless they believe that people are watching. They need to know that there are political consequences. This is not everybody, and certainly elected officials have the issues that they care about, but for things that maybe aren't on their radar or are controversial, sometimes they need to be pushed out of their, comfort zone. They also they have hundreds of bills that they're dealing with. And they don't always read every single one. They rely on lobbyists. They rely on their aides. They rely on organizations and fact sheets. They rely on the media to kind of understand policies and how they're going to impact people. So, media coverage sometimes acts as a shortcut for helping them understand what's politically relevant. So really, media is kind of a political signal for legislators. Lawmakers track media coverage closely. Coverage signals to them what voters are concerned about. And as I mentioned, silence can feel safe. Attention creates accountability. So if they're not hearing about it, they think people aren't paying attention. If they are hearing about it, then they tend to pay more attention. So there's two kind of big media buckets. I think we all know this. There's the mainstream media, which is more traditional newspapers, TV and radio, and then more recently, online news sites. And then there's the social media bucket, which, the big outlets are Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads, Reddit is one I didn't mention or didn't put on here. I'm sure there are more that I'm missing. And both matter. And as activists, we need to be using these methods strategically to reach different people. They serve different purposes. So we'll talk about what those are. And I think it's important for us to be thinking strategically rather than through emotion when we are kind of targeting different media outlets. There is no single best platform to use. Effective campaigns sort of match the medium to the audience that they're trying to reach. And it's not also about age in terms of who's consuming what, but income, geography, education, these all can impact, who is reading or consuming which medium. And rural and older audiences do rely heavily on local TV and radio, so kind of keeping that in mind. But some general notions here are like social media is now the top news source for US adults overall. TV news still dominates for adults 50 and over, and print readership does skew older, but also remains influential locally, particularly for our elected officials. So just some sort of generalization about who, is consuming which types of media. Gen Z, like 18 to 29-year-olds, are typically skewing towards, social and online media. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, short videos, visuals, authenticity are important to this crowd. Millennials and Gen Xers are kind of a mix. They're a mix of social and digital news sites. Facebook is still relevant to these folks. And then for boomers, 55 and up, more TV news, radio, newspapers. They are more on Facebook than maybe some other generations. And then also letters and op-eds are still powerful for this group. And also keep in mind that a lot of elected officials are in the boomer or Gen X age group. So they're consuming this media just sort of as part of their generation. So again, kind of thinking about your target audience, who you're trying to reach, and using those media outlets effectively. So I want to talk about op-eds and letters to the editor more, a little bit more deeply, because this is one way that our members often utilize media, and one of the tactics that we use. So just kind of thinking through the pros and cons. The pros are that it's a direct voice, so it can be you, it can be someone, from a small business, or, you can kind of cater it to an author that is important to the issue. It helps shape the community conversation, and it's often read by elected officials, particularly if their name is mentioned. The cons are, there's a high rejection rate. If you are, it's easy to make a mistake and get rejected, or, not get the timing right. It requires clarity and discipline, and it's best used when you want to influence public opinion, if you have a strong constituent perspective, and again, making sure that you name the elected official. And the reason is electeds will have a Google search or some kind of online search that where they plug their name in, and any news article or any media that mentions their name will come in through an email. So they will see those, as opposed to looking at all of the papers, op-eds and LTEs and articles. This is an easy way for them to do that. So if you're trying to target a specific elected, you want to make sure that their name is mentioned in the article so that they do see it. So a couple of steps here to get your op-ed published. First, you want to choose the right publication. Make sure that you're doing your research to find one that aligns with your topic and your audience. The Denver Post is often a publication folks go to, but it is very difficult to get an op-ed or an LTE published in the Denver Post. They just receive thousands of them every week, and so getting yours chosen can be pretty tough. Many local newspapers and online platforms also accept submissions. So some good alternatives are the Colorado Sun, Colorado Newsline, Colorado Politics, and Colorado Community Media, which are the local papers. If you live in the suburbs, there's like the Arvada Press, the Jeffco Transcript, I can't remember all of them right now, but there are a bunch of them. Each local, it's like a free community paper. It comes out weekly. I'm sure there's plenty of other options around the state. These are just the ones that I am most familiar with. But they're far easier to get an op-ed published in than the Denver Post. So don't just go for the biggest. Make sure you understand the submission guidelines, and we can help you with all of these things, but we want folks to feel empowered to do their own thing. Make sure that you read the submission requirements. For example, the Colorado Sun requires op-eds to be no more than 800 words. They don't want it submitted somewhere else. They want to be the only ones who have access to it to be published. They really like there to be a Colorado connection. So they will cover national issues, but only if it has like local flavor to it, or, has some sort of connection to the state. Also needs to include your full name, your contact information, likely a photo, and they also ask for a bio, which we'll talk about in a second. You want to make sure you're crafting a compelling argument. Present a clear, well-supported case. And you also want to tie it to relevant current events. That will give you the biggest edge in terms of getting it published. You want it to be you want it to resonate with ongoing discussions or news stories, especially if they've published an article on that topic. Make sure you're getting it in close to when that article ran, to kind of connect it to that issue. Write with clarity and precision. This is obvious. Make sure that there's a strong opening. We want it to be attention grabbing. Have well-structured arguments supported by evidence. Definitely include links if you're citing statistics. And you can even link it to their previous articles, if that's helpful. Avoid personal anecdotes in op-eds unless they serve a purpose to sort of illustrate your points. You want to aim for a persuasive tone that engages readers. Make sure you edit, revise it, consider getting a second opinion or a second set of eyes. I am always happy to look over op-eds or LTEs to, help you make sure it all flows well and that the arguments are strong. And then you submit it following their process. Make sure, again, that you're clear on what that is. Sometimes there's an online form. Sometimes you just send it to an email. And then making sure, oftentimes they will ask for a bio. So that's just one sentence, kind of like who you are. You don't have to have it be super detailed. If you have an expertise in the issue you're talking about, you want to mention that to give yourself more credibility. But don't overthink it. It can just be, I'm a mom, from Arvada, and I have 2 kids, something like that. If you don't hear back from them within a week or 2, it's generally acceptable to ping them and ask, what the status is of your submission. They receive a lot of op-eds, and just because they haven't published it in a week or 2 doesn't mean they won't. Sometimes it's a timing issue. So feel free to try again. And then if they, don't get back to you, submit it to a different publication. You've done the work, you've written the article, try a few different outlets before you give up. Let's talk about LTEs, or letter to the editors. A lot of these are the same sort of guidelines. Choose a timely topic. Often with letters to the editor, it's really helpful to cite a previous article that the paper that you're submitting it to published. That they're more likely to publish LTEs that are citing a recent article from their paper. Again, if you are targeting a lawmaker, make sure you name them in your LTE. Follow the submission guidelines. You will need to be more concise with an LTE because the the word count is much smaller, usually like 150 to 300 words, but it depends on the publication. Sometimes it's higher than that. Clearly state your position, support it with evidence. Personal stories are welcome. And a focused message is more likely to catch an editor's attention. I already covered this next one, responding to specific articles. Express your unique perspective. Letters that have a distinct viewpoint or story are more likely to stand out. And then, again, be persistent. If you don't hear from them, don't be discouraged. Try again. I've definitely resubmitted LTEs later, even like a month or 2 later, and have gotten them published. And you can also try a different publication. All right, so moving on to social media. So I think, social media may not always directly influence lawmakers. Sometimes it's an indirect influence. Reporters are looking at social aides that are often younger than the lawmaker are looking at social media. The public is looking at social media. So you don't need to just be focused on whether the lawmaker themselves are seeing it, but because people around them will be seeing it or potentially seeing it. You definitely want to tag your lawmaker. I think most of us are aware of that. But also just being really careful about being respectful and polite, not trolling folks, not making it abusive. This is all, common sense, but definitely tag them in your posts so that they see it. So social media really, helps shape the narrative if it's used right. It's a great tool for rapid response if you're trying to get things out quickly. Often, newspapers are slow. So if you need something out that day or that, the next day or two, social media is helpful. You can control the timing on it a little better. It has peer-to-peer trust built into it, and it can put pressure, public pressure on lawmakers. The goal here is not just likes, it's repetition, it's visibility, it's signaling constituent concerns. Effective tools on social media include, videos, short videos, no more than 60 to 90 seconds. Sometimes shorter is better. But, putting a face, people are far more likely to watch videos than read things, to read posts. So videos are always encouraged. Shareable graphics, so friends can share it, or colleagues can share it. Hashtag campaigns can be effective. And then, of course, tagging lawmakers, which we already mentioned. So a couple of tips on video, again, keeping them short. You want it to be one idea, one ask, one story. Authenticity matters more than quality. You don't need to have a professional videographer edit your video. Being authentic is more important than being fancy. Video, why video works. There's high engagement. It's easy to share. It humanizes complex issues. If you can put it into words that are more accessible to folks, that are easier to understand, people are more likely to pay attention to what you're saying. Some pros are, there's strong emotional impact potential. It reaches younger audiences, being on social, and just, younger audiences being more likely to watch videos. The cons are it can be time intensive, and it's algorithm dependent, so you can't always control who's going to see it. And it's best used when you have a personal story, when you need fast amplification, that sort of rapid response. So just some tips there. So when do we use which strategy? It's important to note that the best campaigns use a layered approach. They don't use one medium or another. They use multiple things. Social media, mainstream coverage, direct pressure, these are all they all sort of serve a purpose. And lawmakers notice patterns. So the more that they're seeing something and the more places that they're seeing the same message, the more they're going to notice it, and it will feel more relevant and important for them to pay attention. Use mainstream media when you want credibility, when you're targeting older voters, and when you're looking to influence institutional decision makers. Again, remembering that they are likely personally using this media or consuming this media, and they're also going to be searching this kind of mainstream media for their names. And then using social media when speed matters, when you can't wait for the paper to publish your LTE or op-ed, when you need visibility and you're looking for momentum and you need to mobilize people quickly. Make sure that you are prioritizing authenticity and accuracy over trying to make something go viral, which I have on this slide actually. So common pitfalls, making sure you don't rely just on one platform, as I mentioned. Don't overload with data. You want to really focus on storytelling and kind of connecting that human story to the issue as opposed to throwing a bunch of numbers at people. I think this is pretty well known, but storytelling matters more. Like ignoring the tone, ignoring accuracy, focusing on just getting it out there really broadly is a mistake. You want to make sure you're accurate. You want to make sure your tone matches the moment. And making sure that you have a strategy and aren't just trying to get it out there and getting a video to go viral. Talking about what lawmakers actually notice, as I mentioned, multiple media hits, multiple mediums, having a layered approach, using social and mainstream. Constituent voices are really important to them. Sustained coverage over time, not one issue or one article getting published. You want to make sure that there's lots of different coverage, and then repeating your message, like having a clear repeated message that sort of carries throughout the campaign are important. All right, best practices for activists: keeping messaging simple, center it around people, not policy, being persistent, and again, coordinating across platforms. And then just kind of a final takeaway and reminder that, attention the goal isn't just attention. It's influence. It's leverage, and it's best when paired with organizing and coalition building and direct advocacy. So media is just one tool in our tool belt. We want to make sure we're using it strategically, that we're matching the medium to the audience, that we are, and the message to that audience, that we're combining legitimacy with broad reach, and making inaction feel riskier than action for these decision makers. Making sure that they see that people care about these issues and that they're talking about these issues makes it harder for a lawmaker to ignore it or not respond. And I'll just say that federally, some of this can feel really difficult. Our ability to influence media at the local level is a lot easier. It is a lot easier to get our message out to state lawmakers, to city council members, school board members, county commissioners. Don't discount the importance of engaging our local government bodies. We have a lot of control and power in those spaces. And I think often we focus on what's happening nationally, and for good reason, particularly these days. But we still have a lot of ability to sway our decision makers at the local level. So I hope this was helpful. I am here to help you with any of this. If you are interested in writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed, if you're interested in speaking to the media, we didn't talk about that at this training, but happy to talk more about that. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And I look forward to any questions folks have, and let's get some media coverage on these important issues this year. So thanks so much. Hope you all have a great day, and we'll be in touch.